She was about to sign the divorce papers when her ex-husband's billionaire brother said, "Marry me instead." Subscribe to the channel, and before we start the story, let us know in the comments which city you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The law office in Boston was so still that Sarah could hear the faint scratch of the clock on the wall. Her gaze dropped to the stack of divorce papers resting in front of her, and her fingers trembled as they hovered above the pen. It wasn't only the end of a 7-year marriage staring back at her, it was the collapse of years she had built around a man who had never really been there. Mr. Henderson, her attorney, spoke with measured precision, his voice steady, professional, almost rehearsed. "Mrs. Mitchell, when you're ready, sign on the last page. That will allow us to proceed with the filing." Sarah didn't answer. The words barely registered. All she could hear was David's voice, sharp and dismissive, echoing inside her skull. "You're never enough, Sarah. Not for me, not for anyone." Those words had carved scars deeper than any betrayal could. Her chest tightened. She drew in a breath, trying to summon strength, but it only left her feeling more fragile. The navy blazer she wore made her appear composed, but beneath the fabric her body felt hollow, as though every ounce of dignity had been drained. She thought of Emma, their 6-year-old daughter, whose nightly questions pierced through her heart like glass shards. "Mommy, why don't you and Daddy laugh together anymore?" Sarah picked up the pen. Her hand wavered, the tip grazing the page. One stroke, and she would sever herself from the man who had turned her into a shadow. One stroke, and Emma's innocent questions would finally have an answer, though not the one Sarah ever wished to give. Then, just as the pen touched paper, the door burst open. The sound cut through the silence like a gunshot. Sarah's head jerked up. Standing in the doorway was Mark Mitchell, David's younger brother. He was taller than she remembered, shoulders broad, posture commanding. His grey eyes were steady, unreadable, as though he could pierce straight through her defenses. "Don't sign," he said, his tone firm, unshakable. Sarah's heart skipped. Her grip on the pen loosened. "Mark!" Her voice cracked, caught somewhere between shock and confusion. "What are you doing here?" He closed the door behind him with deliberate calm, the click of the latch final, sealing them in. He stepped forward, his eyes locked on hers. "I'm here," he said, his voice low but edged with certainty, "to stop you from giving David exactly what he wants, the power to destroy what's left of your life." Sarah's pulse quickened, the pen slipping from her hand and rolling silently across the polished wood of the table. She stared at Mark, stunned, words caught in her throat as her world tilted into an unfamiliar direction. And that was the moment everything began to change. Sarah pushed back her chair so suddenly that its legs scraped against the floor. She stood, shoulders tense, as though distance could shield her from the storm Mark had just unleashed. "This has nothing to do with you," she said, her voice trembling but defiant. "It's between me and your brother." Mark didn't flinch. He stepped closer, his grey eyes locked on hers, steady and unwavering. "No, Sarah. It's always been about you. And me." The room fell into a silence so sharp that Sarah's breath echoed inside her chest. But within that silence, her mind betrayed her, dragging her back to a night she had buried too deep. 2 years earlier, Washington, D.C., a glittering gala filled with politicians and their polished spouses. She had slipped out to the terrace, mascara smudged from tears she couldn't hold back. And it wasn't David who noticed, wasn't her husband who followed her out. It was Mark. He had draped his jacket across her bare shoulders, his touch warm without crossing a line. He hadn't asked for explanations. He had simply seen her, truly seen her. "You told me that night I deserved more," Sarah whispered now, her throat tight with old grief. "And then you disappeared." Mark's jaw clenched, his voice roughened by something that sounded like regret. "Because I respected your marriage. I told myself walking away was the only decent thing to do, but every time I saw my brother dismiss you, belittle you, treat you like you were invisible. Sarah, I wanted to break the silence. I wanted to take you away from all of it." His words cut through her like glass. She laughed, but the sound was bitter, empty. "Seeing me doesn't change anything. It doesn't erase who I am, David's ex-wife. Tell me, how do you think this ends?" For the first time, Mark hesitated. His hand slipped into the pocket of his tailored jacket, fingers curling around something hidden. Slowly, he pulled out a small velvet box and opened it with care. Inside, nestled against black satin, lay an emerald ring that shimmered under the office light. Not flashy like the diamond David once gave her, but deep, vibrant, alive. "It ends," Mark said, voice low but steady, "with you making a choice, for once in your life, that isn't about David or his career or the family name. It ends with you choosing what's best for you and for Emma." Sarah's breath caught, her eyes darting from the ring to the man holding it out with such conviction. The weight of his words pressed on her chest, more suffocating than the silence had ever been. Her lips parted, but no words came. The walls she had built around herself for years felt as if they were starting to crack, brick by fragile brick. And in that suspended moment, with the emerald glinting between them and unspoken confessions hanging in the air, Sarah realized she stood at the edge of something she had never dared to imagine. At home that evening, Sarah sat on the edge of the couch, her gaze fixed on Emma, who was sprawled across the rug with her dolls lined in perfect rows. The little girl's laughter filled the room, but suddenly she paused, looking up with eyes that were far too perceptive for her age. "Mommy," Emma said softly, clutching a doll to her chest. "Uncle Mark really likes me. He listens to what I say. He even asked me about my butterfly project. Daddy never asks." The words hit Sarah like a blade, twisting deep. She forced a smile for Emma's sake, but inside her chest a storm raged. Her daughter could already see what she had tried for years to hide. David wasn't there, not for her, not for their child. But Mark. Mark noticed, always. Later that night, once Emma had fallen asleep clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit, Sarah retreated to her bedroom and dialed her sister in Chicago. When Jessica answered, Sarah's voice broke before she even spoke the words. "Jess, he asked me to marry him. Mark, in the attorney's office." There was a long silence on the other end, heavy with shock, before Jessica finally breathed out. "Sarah, that sounds insane, but maybe it's the kind of insanity you've needed all along. I watched you vanish during those 7 years with David. If Mark sees you, truly sees you, you owe it to yourself to think about it." Sarah gripped the phone tighter, her nails digging into her palm. Her thoughts tangled between fear and hope, the scandal it could spark, the judgment, the whispers, the headlines. But then there was Mark's voice, his patience, the way he made her feel visible again. And Emma already trusted him. The next morning, Sarah agreed to meet him. She chose a quiet cafe somewhere far from prying eyes. When Mark arrived, he wasn't the imposing figure she had seen in the law office. He wore jeans and a simple sweater, his presence disarmingly normal. For a moment, she could almost imagine a life that was uncomplicated, ordinary, safe. He sat across from her, leaning forward with sincerity etched in every line of his face. "I'm not asking you to rush," he said, voice steady. "And I'm not here to play hero. I don't want to save you. I want to walk beside you. You and Emma deserve something real." Sarah's eyes narrowed, her defenses rising. "And what if this is just attraction? What if it burns out and I end up right back where I started? What if it ends in disaster just like it did with David?" Mark didn't flinch. He drew in a deep breath, his eyes never leaving hers. "Then at least it will have been your choice. Not David's, not the family's, not anyone else's. Yours." "But Sarah," his voice softened almost a plea, Don't let fear make every decision for you. Don't let it steal the life you still deserve to live. Sarah's throat tightened. She lowered her eyes to the untouched coffee between them, steam curling upward as if mocking her hesitation. The weight of the past pressed hard on her shoulders, but so did the flicker of something she hadn't felt in years, possibility. And as Mark's words settled over her, lingering long after the silence fell, Sarah knew she was standing at another threshold, one she could no longer ignore. Months later, the Mitchell estate in Vermont looked nothing like the place Sarah once feared. Rows of white chairs lined the garden, filled with only the closest of friends and family. No spectacle, no politics, no staged perfection. It was quiet enough for every word, every vow, every heartbeat to matter. At the head of the aisle, Emma skipped forward, tossing rose petals from a small basket with both hands. On her wrist glimmered a silver charm bracelet Mark had given her, a gift meant not as decoration, but as promise. Each charm, carefully chosen, carried the weight of beginnings. A butterfly for growth, a book for learning, a heart for family. She grinned as the petals floated around her, shouting in a whisper only a child could manage, "It's happening, Mummy!" Sarah followed behind, her steps slow but steady. She wore no veil, no elaborate train. There was no father at her side, no hand delivering her as though she belonged to someone else. She walked alone, because this time it wasn't about tradition or appearances. It was her choice. Every step was hers. At the altar, Mark stood waiting, shoulders straight, expression unwavering. His grey eyes locked on her as though no one else existed, and when she reached him, he spoke without hesitation, his voice carrying across the small gathering. "Sarah, you've shown me that love isn't about rescuing someone. It's about choosing them day after day, no matter the cost. And I choose you. Always." Her fingers trembled as they reached for his, but when she opened her mouth, her voice was stronger than she expected, anchored by truth. "I lost myself in my marriage to David. I let silence and shadows define me. But with you, I found my way back. You reminded me I deserve something real. So I promised to walk with you, never behind, never ahead, but always beside you." The officiant's words blurred into the background, drowned by the pounding in her chest. And when Mark leaned in, their kiss wasn't just a seal of vows. It was the closing of a wound, the mending of years, the birth of something whole. Emma, unable to contain herself, rushed forward and wrapped her small arms around both of them, nearly knocking the bouquet from Sarah's hand. "Now we're a real family," she declared, eyes sparkling with pride. Sarah laughed through tears, holding Emma tight with one arm and Mark with the other. For the first time in years, her smile wasn't staged for photographs, or forced for appearances, or painted to mask despair. It was unguarded, raw, alive. And in that moment, Sarah understood. Endings weren't just about loss. They were about clearing the path for beginnings that finally mattered. This wasn't survival anymore. This was living. The end.